You're listening to Art Affairs, episode 95. Today I'll be talking to Joram Roukes. So my name is Michael Faith, and this is Art Affairs. Art Affairs is my attempt at shining a spotlight on the many wonderful people that make up this amazing art community, featuring conversations with artists, gallerists, curators, telling their stories. You can dig through previous episodes, complete with show notes, at artaffairs.podcast.com, but the best way to stay plugged in is to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're really enjoying the show and want to help support what I'm doing here in an even bigger way, check out the Art Affairs Patreon. Not only does it give you an opportunity to help keep the show going, but there are several community-oriented benefits as well, like getting early access to episodes and suggesting questions for upcoming guests. You can find all the information about that at patreon.com/artaffairs. You can also connect with the show on Instagram at Art Affairs Podcast. All right, so today's guest is artist Joram Roukes. Joram creates super interesting paintings combining several disparate elements in the form of a collage to make a cohesive narrative. Growing up in a small town just outside of Amsterdam, his work is heavily informed by his experience with graffiti culture there in the Netherlands. We talk about how he found his love of graffiti on the show, as well as how that has continued to leave an imprint on his work today, what he's been up to lately, and a whole lot more. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Joram Roukes. Joram, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you on, man.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thanks for having me.
All right, awesome. So let's dive into your background a little bit. And I know that you were born and grew up in, I believe, Lelystad, which is in the central of the Netherlands. Yep. And according to Google, it's like a 78,000 person town. So, relatively small, but big enough to have, stuff going on. What was the area like when you were growing up, though?
Surprisingly little stuff going on there. It's an interesting place in, I guess you could say in how sterile and boring it kind of is. I'm not trying to talk it down. I had a great childhood growing up there. But it's a city with no history or culture. So what is actually kind of an interesting place in terms of how it came about. It's I gotta say this right. I think it's about 60 or 70 years old, just the city and the land that it's sitting on, because it used to be part of what used to be called the Southern Sea. Which was, attached and adjacent to the North Sea, basically. And they basically they created this big island out of the sea, which was to become like a forensic city, a forensic place for people that lived and worked in Amsterdam mostly. So my parents, my dad grew up in Amsterdam, and my mom was from Utrecht, which is not too far from Amsterdam, and after they got married, I think, or shortly before, they decided to move there. There was job opportunities, but not much else really. So it was like this very new, postmodern, new city where everything still needed to be invented and
interesting
and get started. So I guess what you could say we were like first or second generation of people that actually grew up there and had their childhood. So
that's interesting because I'd seen that it was a reclaimed city or reclaimed land, and I wasn't sure exactly what that meant. Yeah. And it seemed to be like it was originally underwater.
Yeah.
And like there was some process of I don't know what does that involve? Do you know, like how did they make that into something that's not just covered in water?
Well, so it's this big engineerial sort of marvel, basically. So it is pretty intense, the way that it came about, and the name of the city, Lelystad. So the first four letters, Lely, That's actually the last name of this water engineer that like invented this technology, or he ran the entire program of turning that part of the sea into land.
Wow.
And then the final four letters STAD, that's stad, which is Dutch for city. Yeah, it's interesting because in that area that used to be sea, there were a couple of like, small islands that have been there for a long time. So they basically created that new land around those old little islands. So you have these small pockets of history and culture sitting in this new land, which is not, it's not like 95% agricultural landscape, and some just a handful of postmodern cities scattered throughout. So, and then you got this small like island in the lands, is what they call it. So, yeah.
Interesting. And so you mentioned that your parents had moved there because of like job opportunities. What kind of work did they do? Anything artistic?
No, not really. My dad always used to be a government employee, local and regional governments. So he had some part in, the development of the area in that function. And my mom didn't work the first, so many years when she had us, me and my older brother and my younger sister. And then later she started, doing work for administrative stuff, jobs like that. So it's nothing too creative. My mom, she has a creative side to her. Like she dabbles whenever. She just retired recently. So I think she's, going to start picking some creative stuff up, but more as like a hobby. But in the stuff that she would do hobby wise, I could tell like there is some kind of talent there. My dad is like just this very alpha numbers guy. So whenever I have an accounting question, I can reach out to him and he'll help me with that. So yeah, but no careers in the arts whatsoever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Being from kind of a smaller town, did you have much of an opportunity? Like, did you spend a lot of time in nature, or did you go into like Amsterdam and spend more time in the city?
Yeah, well, both actually. So I grew up in nature a lot because, just the way the land was made, they couldn't cultivate every part of the land. So a lot of it was still swamp and, willow forest and stuff like that, which was great, for hanging around in, building huts and just, messing around. And then there was just this really one big swampy area that they just, for the life of them, they couldn't seem to cultivate it or make the soil firm enough to do any construction on. So they just established this big national park. And I spent a lot of time in my youth there, bird watching, something that I got from my granddad mostly. So that was actually a really great place growing up. If you're into nature and birds and stuff like that, which was the case for me. And then at some point when you get a little older, you want to be entertained. You want to go out and have some cultural offerings in your area, which it just wasn't there so much. So we had to venture out to Amsterdam, kind of explore what Amsterdam had to offer, which obviously is a hell of a lot more.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And so, how did you become interested in making art yourself? If you didn't have so many people around you and your family that had that like kind of artistic, maybe not skill set, but just experience.
Yeah.
How did you become interested in making art?
I was just excited about it. I remember that my brother definitely had a talent in drawing, and he's only a year and a half older than me, but when you're young, that's a big age gap. And so he was a year and a half ahead of me in terms of anything, and he could draw. Like he could draw stuff, and I think he did like some comic stuff. Nothing super advanced, but enough for me to realize that he had a hand for it, and I think that sparked with me as well. And I guess I just enjoyed it more and pursued it more, and it kind of coincided with the birding thing. So the earliest memories I have is, being excited about, birds of prey, basically, because they're just the coolest.
Yeah.
And then drawing them in school, whenever I was done with my calculus or reading task, I would, just draw in the notebooks, and I would draw birds mostly, and it just, from there, it went through all these loops and turns, until it finally sort of came back to drawing birds again, but just a little bit better. So,
And so back when you were like using it as an outlet for, expressing your love of birds, in school, were you taking your focus on art seriously, or was it more of a hobby and you wanted to like maybe do other things like doctor or lawyer? Like when people asked you, what do you want to be when you grow up? Did you know you wanted to be an artist already, or were you like shooting for something else?
I always said I wanted to be a drawer, which that's not the right word, but an illustrator, basically. I wanted to draw stuff. And I had no idea, what that would entail as a profession. But yeah, I would either answer an illustrator or a biologist, because those were the two things that I liked the most. And I guess they both kind of stuck, but the art stuff more in a professional sense. So I had an idea of that I wanted to pursue that. I just had no idea for both, like even a biologist. I just knew there was this one biologist guy that would be on Dutch television. And, he got to go into nature and, look at little animals, and he knew a lot about birds. I was like, I could be that guy,
Right.
But I didn't understand what it would mean in a professional sense. And that actually, it took a while for me to gain that understanding. But yeah, I pursued the artistic thing, and it worked out. So,
I mean, yeah, everybody watching David Attenborough wants to be David Attenborough.
Yeah, because what could be better, right? You travel and you get to interact with nature in that amazing kind of ways.
Right.
Yeah.
So were your parents supportive of your interest in making art?
Yeah, absolutely.
Becoming an artist?
Yeah. They always facilitated as much as they could, making sure I had stuff to draw with, and just a lot of positive reinforcing. And they would send me, only if I was interested in going, like send me to, after school classes, and, just doing stuff that helped me develop, getting better at what I like doing. And, and then later on, they would like subtly express their concerns about venturing into an artistic career, because it's, it comes with tons of insecurities. But never in a way that discouraged me, or they always said, like, hey, if this is what you want to do, you want to go to art school, that's, we support you 100%. And so that was really great. Yeah.
Awesome. And so from what I understand, it was in high school that you really kind of first took an interest in graffiti. I guess, how did you discover it? Was it something that you felt like you had around you? I mean, if you were in a smaller town, how did that even become something that you gained awareness of?
It was around, actually, believe it or not. It's, even, I think it's because of the uniformity and the sterileness of that city, that there was this group of people early on that wanted to sort of, break through that. So graffiti was definitely present. And I remember we had the sports building that was attached to the high school that I went to. In the early years, it was just like 360 degrees. It was covered in graffiti.
Wow.
And like high level graffiti stuff. And it's something that made a big imprint. And like even before that, even I think in elementary school, I would see tags and even etchings, I remember, or like scratching in windows and stuff like that. And I remember like not understanding what it was, but noticing it, and it kind of like making a lasting impression. But not in a sense that I wanted to really understand more about it until I, came across it more. And that was in high school. I met some people in high school that were, they were into graffiti or doing graffiti, and even the sports team that I was playing in, some people were dabbling in graffiti. And I remember just getting really excited about the stories that they would tell me, like running from the police and going out at night, like really like the adventure part of it. Like that's incredible. And it's like when you become an adolescent, like you sort of want to like look for those kind of escapes, and so that really lit a spark, and it kind of made me want to find out more about it. And luckily, I think around the time, internet was already around, so it was easy for me to go on the internet and find out about stuff that people in Amsterdam were doing, and even discovering that Amsterdam had this pretty important graffiti history. And that's when it became a big fascination and a big passion, actually.
Very cool. And so, like, being close to Amsterdam, or relatively close to Amsterdam, were you going into Amsterdam to explore this more, or was it something that you tried to express more in your hometown?
Oh, both. Because I had one friend that I worked with that I kind of started like doing actual graffiti with. Like we messed around a little bit, a couple years, doing some underpasses and kind of figuring out how the techniques work. And then when I met this friend, we kind of got a little bit more serious, and we wanted to do track sites and maybe even paint trains occasionally. So we did some stuff in our hometown, but the track sites, you could only, back then the Lelystad was still the end station, so the train would terminate there. So the only way you could go was towards Amsterdam, and it was like only a couple cities in between. And we really wanted to do the track sites and then take the train to Amsterdam the next morning, and get excited about seeing your own stuff. And then in Amsterdam, obviously there was so much more, and you had a bunch of legal walls that we would want to go and check out pieces from people that were painting back then. And it was a lot of Delta, which is a huge name in graffiti, and those were like the little treasures that you would find around Amsterdam. So there was no Instagram, so it wasn't like there was a community telling you where to look for things. It was just hearsay. And then it was kind of a sport, just going out to Amsterdam and finding the spots that Delta or a bunch of other guys had painted, and just marvel at it and look at it and be like, this is amazing,
Yeah.
And then kind of wanting to be that and get to that level, and
That's so cool. Did you ever get in any kind of like trouble, or like
Yeah.
what was the city's like position on this sort of stuff?
So in Lelystad, I survived without getting into, maybe we had to run a handful of times, but never anything serious. It wasn't until, I went to art school in a city called Groningen, which is in the north part of the Netherlands. And I found a different group of writers there, really great guys. They're still my best friends. And they were just more fun people to hang out with, aside from the graffiti aspect. They were just like closer friends, which made the graffiti part so much more fun too. So we got pretty excited and carried away a little bit. And it was like around my graduation time, when I had to graduate from art school and working on my thesis project and everything, is when we got into some trouble with the law. And it was this perfect storm of things coming together, and it's almost like a climactic ending to the years that we enjoyed doing that. And after that we sort of said goodbye to it. And
you mentioned going to school in the north there. I believe it was Minerva Academy of Arts. Why there specifically? What was it about that school that attracted you?
I like the atmosphere. It was pretty far from where I grew up, for Dutch standards, that is. But I had applied to the Rietveld Academy in Amsterdam, which is a little bit more prestigious. So it was a little bit more prestigious and much more conceptual. And my artwork that I was doing then, it was very, very graffiti based and very much revolving around graffiti and hip hop culture. And that wasn't very appealing to that type of academy, per se. So they didn't really see the merit in my work as much. It didn't have enough of a conceptual base, I think. And then the Minerva Academy in Groningen is just their vibe. The whole atmosphere was just a little bit more laid back, and they weren't as much trying to build your artistic identity from the ground up. Like, you could easily work with what you already had going on and sort of build on that. It felt comfortable. And I had a girlfriend at the time who was studying in the university there, which is, I would say it's a detail, but it was definitely one of the reasons I was looking into that school in the first place. So yeah.
Awesome. And so your focus while you were there, was it fine art? Was it like painting and drawing?
Yeah. Heavy focus on painting. I did my first couple of years were it's the education called autonomous art. Basically, you're just working on your own artistic practice. It was a little loose for me. So it was hard to sort of maintain a focus on the classes, and I felt like still the conceptual development of my work was a very tough part for me to do. So I kind of first couple of years I was pretty insecure and kind of sort of managing my way through. And I switched from the autonomous education to the educational side of things. So basically, where you learn to become art teacher and develop that skill set. So that's actually where I graduated, with still a heavy emphasis on painting and autonomous art, kind of like a dual sort of education, and that actually worked for me, just because the structure of that course was just a little bit more, you have to be there, follow the classes, instead of, just show up every trimester and show us what you've been working on, and,
right.
A little bit more structured. So that worked a little better for me.
Awesome. And you graduated with your BFA in 2006. How do you feel about your time at school? Do you feel that experience, after kind of finding the program that worked best for you, do you feel that it helped you grow in like the ways that you needed?
Yeah, definitely. Especially upon the end, in the beginning was tough. Like I said, just developing the conceptual base. I was 19 when I went there, which it's very young. You're surrounded by these students that are generally a lot older, and they have a much better sense of what their work is, conceptually, and where it stands in what tradition, and that was a little tough for me. And it didn't help that I was heavily involved in graffiti, and that was my number one thing in life. It ruled everything and the way you viewed the world, and I thought it was all pretty damn artistic, the stuff that we were doing.
For sure.
And I tried to incorporate that into the academy, and basically say, like, these are the murals that we're making. I think they're pretty high level, and what do you guys think? But there was no knowledge on the phenomenon yet. It was a little bit too early, I think. Before, like you see now, where street art, muralism, all that stuff is a little bit more widely accepted, and it's actually part of the academy programs too. So it wasn't like that at that time, and I struggled with making that part of the artistic journey in art school. But then, I sort of developed the work into from being very much graffiti to making it more about graffiti, and like all the stuff that graffiti is about, and the world that you maneuver in, and all the stuff that comes with it. It's like this whole atmosphere of that exists around being an active graffiti writer, which is massively more interesting than 5 letters on a wall, So it kind of became the context that my work started existing in, and that slowly, became its own conceptual basis for the work, and that worked. So I had tutors and teachers then that were starting to appreciate the work that it was becoming, and it just so happened that the incident where we got arrested and that whole situation, as unfortunate as it was, it funny enough, it did help my work gain authenticity, you know. So I sort of kind of like just made it into a part of my thesis body of work, and saying like, I really went through this. Like this is really my fiber. It's in my fiber. For my graduation presentation, you know, instead of taking the wall space that the academy would give to you, I squatted this old, like, abandoned warehouse right behind the central station. I turned it into a gallery and painted a mural, and I really sort of went for it and said, okay, graffiti, it's about, you know, taking what you want and you know, going big, and that's what my work is about. Even though it's, you know, it's academic work now, I still want to have that same approach, and that it was really well received, and
nice.
it just came together, you know, at the perfect time.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
It's like you made it more about, like, you refocused the conversation around the culture of graffiti rather than
Absolutely.
just the final product.
Yeah. Because that's the product is so aesthetically driven. You know, it's making them the shiniest, the boldest, the most colorful, the wildest. You know, but it's still very superficial. You know, the individual expression, but the whole entourage and the whole context around it, it's you know, massively more interesting than just the individual outcome of it. So
yeah, that's awesome. And that's really cool that you were doing it in a time before that was like as accepted as it is today.
Yeah, it would have been a different experience now, I would say, but you know, I'm happy it went the way it went. I sort of had to fight for it, and it helped me a lot. So that's a good thing.
That's awesome. So after graduating, did you go back home to Lelystad, or did you stick around the north and stay there?
I stuck around the north. I got just enough push for the graduation presentation. I got nominated for some awards, and you know, I got some showing opportunities, which was great. So I actually, you know, was able to keep pursuing the artistic side of things instead of becoming a teacher, which I also graduated for, and stayed in Groningen for a good couple of years, and then I had some international adventures. Moved to Brooklyn, spent some time in New York.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. In 2008, you got a stipend, I guess, or you were kind of basically given a grant from the Netherlands Art Foundation. Tell me about that. Like, what did that involve? Was it something that they reached out to you to like reward you, or did you apply and you were like competing with others, or like what did that process involve?
So it's something that you can apply for. It's basically an open application for anyone who graduated any art school in the Netherlands less than 4 years ago. So you have to write this big proposal, and you know, explain your work, explain your intentions when you get the grant, what you want to do with it, how do you think it's going to help develop your practice, and so still, you know, running on that high of the graduation, which was really a big deal. I figured, okay, there's relevance and authenticity to the work that I'm doing now, so I figured I'd give it a shot. And you know, at that time, you're straight out of art school. Like you don't immediately make a living making your art, so it was struggling just from project to project, and you know, hoping that you sell some work at a show. And luckily, in those days, there were a lot of government programs to help out young artists like myself. So I applied for it, and I guess they appreciated the relevance and the potential in my work, and decided to grant me with the stipend. And that was awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so from what I understand, and like you mentioned earlier, you used that money to ultimately set up a residency in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
So why Brooklyn specifically? What why was that the target of your next project?
I had traveled to New York City twice before. Once with my dad just after I graduated high school, and then one more time with my good friends who I started out doing graffiti with. And you know, like coming into graffiti and understanding what it's about, there's only one place in the world where you want to go, and it's New York City. And you know, it has that immense appeal. And even when it's when my art became a little bit more about just the dynamics of big city life and not as much about graffiti specifically anymore, that was still the place to go to experience, just the immense scale and intensity of New York. And I loved it. So much. It was just a great experience. Yeah.
And I believe you've said in interviews that was really where you defined what your artistic style was. Like that's where you found your voice. So I guess what was it about that experience that kind of helped you define that in that way?
I think just mainly just being there on the stipend. Like you have a responsibility. Like I couldn't take that money and just hang around and
right.
I had a responsibility to use that money and set up something and then create a body of work, and then I had to present it to the foundation. So that was obviously a big motivation to work really hard, because I felt very privileged to receive that stipend. And then just being in that environment, it's incredibly inspiring, because there's not a person in New York who doesn't work really, really hard, really got to go for it. And I kind of, I thrived on that energy for as long as I was there. And I also didn't want to compromise the type of work that I was going to do. I wanted to create a series of life-size, like I think there were 8 feet tall and 5 by 8 feet paintings or something like that. Even though it was massively impractical, like I couldn't ship them anywhere. I figured I'm just going to make these, and however, whatever I need to do to bring them home, I'll do, or I'll leave them here. I'll figure it out later. But I just wanted to make these big impact works, and I think I created a series of 6 of those big ones, and then some smaller stuff. And it was basically the visual language that I still sort of use to this day. It's just collecting references and collecting elements that that can tell a story together, or create this maybe even like a more abstract narrative. But you just collect it and collage it together and sort of see what happens. And so and I'm still using that collage approach. And I think the work that I made there in the Brooklyn residency, like I said, I don't know if there was Instagram or Facebook. I just know that I didn't have it then, so it didn't get like picked up organically the way stuff gets picked up now sometimes, I guess. But I had a blog spot, which is basically what people had. So it's like this site you just like throw your photos on there and write something about it.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of snowballed at some point, and galleries started picking it up. So when I came back from Brooklyn, I went back to Groningen, and it still took a minute, but the work that I did there, it got on people's radars, and it gave me showing opportunities suddenly in London and Denmark, and it's like this is great. Like
that's amazing, and it's cool that like. I mean, obviously the foundation and their grant worked. I mean, mission achieved.
Yeah.
You defined your style, you found your artistic voice, you started getting your work noticed by galleries, all, coming out of that, government grant. So that's amazing.
Yeah, it was a big push for sure. Yeah.
And so I believe it was in 2013 where you had your first show in the U.S., your first kind of big show at Cave Gallery in Venice, I believe. So how did you first connect with them and start building relationships in galleries on the West Coast?
Yeah, so that's actually one of those things where, for me, that came out of nowhere, where I had done some shows, I think in 2010, 2011 in London and Copenhagen. And for me, that was already a huge deal, like doing shows internationally. And then I think, it was either 2012 or 2013, I was approached by the people at Cave Gallery if I wanted to show at their gallery in Venice. It was like all these little pinnacle steps, and that was definitely a big one of them, doing my first show in the US, where, I felt my work would be appropriate for the US, and it was great to get that opportunity. And it was believe it was a 2-man show. I had a good friend who he's from the Netherlands. He moved to Long Beach. I think maybe like 4 or 5 years prior to that moment. So yeah, it was a perfect moment to go, attend the opening and meet up with my good friend and have a great time. So that was great. Yeah.
Yeah, and it seemed like that was like 2013, 2012, 2013 seemed like a pretty big year for you. You had this show in Venice, you had multiple group shows in LA, you had the shows that you mentioned in London and Copenhagen. So did it really start to feel like things were popping off around that time? Like, you were on the scene?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. In hindsight, I think I may have underestimated how important that momentum really was, because I had a great solo show at Stolen Space in London around the same time, and then a little later, Think Space picked up on my work and proposed to do shows and projects, and I don't think I was jaded in any way. It just happened so organically, and I was really enjoying it. All the opportunities and the travels and the experiences that came with it. But I think maybe sometimes I took the momentum for granted. I think that because it slows down after a while too, unless you keep investing in it. And but yeah, it's not something that I regret. It's just the knowledge that I have now looking back. I think that was a pretty big time. I had a big feature in Juxtapose magazine that I had been reading whenever I had the chance of picking one up. This great magazine, and suddenly I had an 8-page spread in it, which was it's unbelievable. So it was like all these little things, and I was getting a lot of show opportunities, and it was a great time. Absolutely.
What was it difficult though to keep up that pace? Because I imagine just all of that work all at once, that could be tough to keep up with.
It was, and I think from when I had my first solo show, I think the first solo was in Copenhagen or London, I'm not sure. And I was on the radar of so many galleries. I was booked every year, either 1 or 2 solo shows and some group projects in between, and I worked really hard to manage all of it. But it did get tedious after a while, and I think it was one of the reasons I started enjoying it less. I started enjoying working on my paintings less, because it was just a constant, almost like a perpetual thing. You do one show, and then you're getting booked for another show a year later. And aside from just the workload, it was a lot of hard work to make the enough paintings. But it was also the sense of every next gallery that want to do a show, they kind of wanted the same type of work as the last show I did, and it would happen at times that in my head I would be I would want to make completely different types of work, or push my my artistic language in a certain direction, and it's hard to sort of break from the expectations that are being put on you. But at the same time, I always felt like I shouldn't complain about this, because there's tons of people that would love to have the same opportunity. So just keep at it, and I think I did that for about 10 years straight, until COVID came, basically, and finally a show got canceled, and it was kind of a moment for me to say, okay, I'm gonna take a break from just working on back-to-back shows, and keep pushing to make the deadlines. And I started noticing that I was taking a shorter amount of time to create the body of work, because I kind of wanted to postpone, and it wouldn't always benefit the quality of the work. And I feel like when you get to that point, it's good to take a breather and kind of reset and reassess, and
Yeah.
And it, luckily, I would almost say, thanks to COVID, it kind of got forced on me to take that step.
Right.
Yeah.
There's nothing like a global pandemic that'll make you pause and take a break for a minute.
Yeah. It's unpopular to say, but yeah.
So I think during that 2013, 2014 period, I think you were living in LA for a little bit, right? And what brought you to live in LA?
Yeah, I was in LA from 2013 till 2016. So 2.5, almost 3 years, I think. It was when I started working with ThinkSpace, and there were circumstances here in the Netherlands that sort of, I had to move out the place I was living in, so I was sort of nomadic for a while, and it was all around at the same time. And I figured if I'm going to be moving around a lot anyway, I might as well, just go to LA, rent a place for a couple months and see how that goes. Initially, I wanted to do a 5-month stay to sort of work on paintings for the ThinkSpace, the first ThinkSpace solo show there, and then go back home. But then, I ended up staying another 2 years, almost 3 years. Yeah.
Awesome. One thing that I noticed about your CV, and you mentioned it, we talked a little bit about it a few times, is your experience doing residencies. So you had the residency in Brooklyn. You were going to do a 5-month residency in LA. You had a month-long residency in France in 2017 that led into the Again, Never Again show. In 2018, you had a residency in Portland that became the Troublemaker show. So you have like a lot of experience with residencies. What is it that you like so much about like that way of working?
Yeah, just indulging in the environment that you're presenting the work in. I think that's a great idea. It's great to be inspired by what goes on around you, and traveling to new places, creating experiences. I was mostly single at the time. I didn't have commitments in the Netherlands, other than family. But I would come back, whenever I could. So. Just taking every opportunity to spend some time in a different country, in a different environment, because I think it's super valuable, and it can only benefit your work, and even if it's in a bad way, it's always a learning experience. And for me, they've all been great. The Burgundy residency was very pivotal. I came out of a hard time coming back out of LA, and I had a lot of experiences there that were difficult for me personally, and coming back home in the Netherlands, I sort of had to like shed all that and cope with that. And I think that the residency in France was a very, very healing one, very cathartic one, and it's always interesting to have these experiences and to see and learn what you can take from it.
And how do these opportunities usually come to you? Is it like, do you apply for them like you did that first one, or do the galleries like suggest it, or how does that work?
It's mainly the galleries that suggest it, and sometimes these things, they just come up at the right time, and and it's great. Like the one in LA and the Brooklyn residencies, those are both things that I set up myself. I had the means, and I figured, okay, this is where I want to do my practice for a couple of months or a couple of years, and otherwise sometimes it's just galleries that provide you with the opportunity, and I'll gladly accept, because it's super rewarding.
Yeah. Do you think you'll do more of these, or have you started to settle down a little bit more at home?
I have definitely settled down a little bit. Yeah, I have a wife and a 4-year-old daughter now. So we moved out of Amsterdam. So we live in the country, and family life it's number one, and everything else around it's just supposed to sort of support that now. And that's it's a little different outlook, but we did do a really fun project 2.5 years ago. I got this project in North County, San Diego, to paint an brand new apartment building, and we were sort of piloting the building as residents, as tenants basically. So we lived in the building, and I painted the facade. So I was lucky enough to bring my wife and my daughter. She just turned 2 at the time, I think. So that if we get an opportunity to do it as a family, that tops every other experience before that, because that's the best thing to do. Now she's going to be in school, and things are going to get a little bit harder when it comes to that. But yeah, you never know if there's a right opportunity and we can make it work. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I can definitely understand how like family would anchor you a bit more, a little bit less of the free spirit.
Yeah, but I think all that stuff was to build up to this point, because this is the best part of life, obviously. So
awesome. So let's dive a little bit more into your work itself. And you mentioned the collage style that formed out of that period in Brooklyn. How did that style become such a central element of your work?
Well, it already actually kind of started when I was in art school, because when I decided to make these paintings about these graffiti worlds, like, these were worlds that didn't actually exist. Like, they were made up of all these elements and references to that environment. So I sort of had to build those worlds myself. And I did that in a collage kind of way too. I actually used actual collage sometimes and pasted elements onto the canvas, like much like any weed paste you would see in cities like Paris or Berlin. Because that was really cool stuff. And so the collage style was kind of like a way to support those worlds when I was even when I was in art school still. It just stuck as it's just this perfect way to assemble your narrative, to create and support your story. You can grab whatever you want, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It shouldn't be perfect. It has to be rough and shaky and ugly, and it gives you a lot of freedom and gives you a way to make an everyday image into something with these fun little abstractions. And it's just the most fun way to play around with visuals.
Awesome. And obviously, animals continue to play a big part in your work. And, what we talked about earlier, growing up in such a nature-rich, area, that I definitely understand how that could also be a central element. But I guess, what role do animals play in your work? Is it about like making a connection with nature, or is it more about using animals to tell, like associating animals with human traits and having it be an abstraction about the human experience?
I think it was that, like earlier on when I was doing a lot of the collages with the human bodies, with the animal heads, and it was to tell the story, basically. Like, what character traits does this animal have, and does it juxtapose whatever the human is doing in the painting, or does it complement it? Or it's just animals can be a strong tool to tell a visual story and to support a narrative. And I think I used it a lot in that way when I was doing that type of work. But I think the more recent work, I feel less of a need to tell a story. I don't know why that fades, or why it doesn't feel as important to me anymore. I feel like it's comforting to just go back to a visual approach and to something that just feels right. And even though it's a little harder to explain why, it just, so sometimes the paintings they revolve more about like animals as a whole, and it'll still have the collage-like abstraction, but it gets more subtle. And I think in a way it's just it's going back to that appreciation for nature that I had when I just in the very, very early beginnings. And now that we live in the country, we're back to where I started. We're just surrounded by nature and green and space. And I'm noticing that I'm getting more excited about it too. Like I go out in nature more, and I bought new binoculars, and
Nice.
it's becoming a bigger part of my life. And I think at the same time, being rooted in having a family and having that peace in your life, it takes away a lot of the angst that used to be there, and the edge that you had when you were younger, and that sort of went hand in hand of wanting to be in a city where all the great stuff but also all the ugly stuff happened, and wanting to communicate that through your work. That's not there so much anymore, and I think the work will still tell a story, but it's just so much more ambiguous and an open narrative. And if I also spend less time in the studio, but there's a different reason for that. But when I do paint and in the studio, I'm fine painting, floral still lifes, or making bird collages, and it just being a bird collage, and it's.
No, it's great, and it kind of goes back to what you're saying earlier about, like, once you took that pause from just grinding, you were able to let go of some of the expectations that were placed from others on your work, and actually do something that you wanted to do and be more authentic with your practice.
Yeah. And back then, like, the stuff that I was doing, it felt super necessary, and looking back, I think some of it was. I don't know, like I said, that there's a lot of adolescent angst maybe still in there. Like, you want to make a painting, and there needs to be something political in it for some reason. And right now, I see absolutely no reason to make my work political, or be critical of society, or I don't know if it makes the work less profound, but the urge is just not there anymore as much. So
yeah, makes sense. Obviously, in the early stage of your career, graffiti played a big role in forming your style, and the graffiti culture itself has informed your style over the years. Do you feel like that still has an element speaking in your work?
Yeah, I think it will always be there, because it's such a formative stage, because you spend so much time doing that, and like I said, it becomes part of you, and it becomes your fiber almost, that it's really hard to shake that. And I don't paint graffiti explicitly into my paintings unless I want to make a reference to it for some reason. But you can still see in the way that that I cut the collage bits that build up the compositions, that in those collage bits and the way they seem to be cut out, there's the same tension that I would use when I would sketch out letters, and it has that same sort of energy. And I think even though it's vague and it's pushed far to the background, people can still sort of recognize it. And it's a tough thing to shake, and I there's no need to forcefully shake it, but
right. I mean, it's a part of you. It's part of your fiber.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So how do you usually arrive at, what's your approach for ideation and brainstorming of new ideas? Do you have a daily sketch routine, or do anything like that, or how do you come up with the ideas that you put into your works?
It's the start is always very visual. So I so many times you get the question what inspires you, and it's such a broad, unspecified question, which is just impossible to give an answer to, but because it could literally be anything. And I start doing the collages in Photoshop, and I collect references, and I do it in a very old-fashioned way. I just go on Google, or even use print magazines sometimes, but just the internet is faster. And I just source all these images, and I have this particular. My work is very composition driven. It needs to have the right tension, and I have a composition in mind, and the reference images that I search for, it needs to support that perfect composition. So I can fill entire libraries with just, for example, a horse head, but it needs to have the exact right angle and the exact right lighting. and the image quality needs to be good. So I go down this rabbit hole of just sourcing images, and it's literally a rabbit hole, because sometimes you start with looking for one reference image and you end up with something completely different, and before your day is gone and you have 5,000 new images on your hard drive. And there just could be that one image that just sparks you. That like, okay, this is the one visual reference that I'm going to build the entire composition around. And then you go from there, and I'm going to search the library that I already have to find stuff that supports that. Or most of it is aesthetically driven. I want to just find the things that support the composition the way I want it to be, and it's an adventure for me to see, what do these elements tell me? Like how does the story unfold? And it's just this abstract route of getting to the collage design. And then once that's done and I'm satisfied, I also know that there's an element of converting that onto the canvas, transferring it onto a canvas, and using paint, which is not at all like dragging and dropping photos.
Right.
It's actually making it, and then you have all this room and this leeway for letting paint be paint, and letting paint do what paint does and let it run, and you can make these abstract smudges and anything. This is this freedom that comes with using paint that no computer software can ever allow you.
Yeah.
So that's a fun process, and there's two ways basically of how I work. Is sometimes I have the collage that I feel really good about, and I want to copy that onto the canvas, or I have a couple different visual references that I think are going to work well together aesthetically or in a narrative, and then I sort of apply them onto the canvas as I go along, and build the composition more intuitively, and that gives a little bit more room for experimenting with paint and abstractions, and just getting a little bit more weird with it. So yeah.
And so even in the first way of working, where you kind of build out the full collage digitally and then paint, does it stay pretty close to that original composition, or do you still diverge in ways once you start painting it?
It differs. I mean, sometimes it's almost an exact copy, and I'm very happy. I can be very happy with the execution of those paintings, because I feel like I transferred it very well technically. But still, the result can be a little bit too sterile, because it's too much of a translation of the digital version, and then there's a middle way basically, where it's I copy the design, but there's still some touches of intuition, and but I think just from a working perspective, the more intuitive ones are more fun, because it's just. They take a little longer too, because there's a lot of staring involved, but that's part of the fun of the process, of course.
Awesome. And obviously, murals are a big part of your practice over the years, especially considering your history with graffiti. That makes a lot of sense. Do you approach ideation and the development of the idea for a mural differently than you would the idea for something that you paint in the studio?
No, not really. It's almost the exact same way. Sometimes I recycle designs, or I use designs that I made for paintings that I just haven't executed, and I tweak them a little bit and use them for a mural. So the approach is pretty much the same, other than just the aspect of intuition and experimentation is a little less prevalent in murals than it is in the studio practice. Which is actually something I wanna train more in murals, but it's tough, because you always have or most of the time it's a commissioned mural. You work with a client, you work for a client, and just they tend to prefer a little bit more of a pristine approach than throwing a bunch of paint, or maybe it's more in my head that I feel like, okay, I need to work a little bit more clean and just execute it to perfection. And but yeah, it's something I would like to do more, is to have a little bit more of a loose approach loose approach to painting murals.
Is there an element of like location that informs the work that you like? Do you do research about the neighborhood that it's going to be in and try to cater that image towards the community?
Yeah, sometimes. I wouldn't say all the time, but sometimes it's being asked of you. Like, could you, like, not as a requirement, but as a suggestion? Like, would you mind looking into the history of the region? I'm doing a project in south of Italy in September, and I think that's something that they pointed out. Like, this is what the region is about, and if you could incorporate that into your work, that would be great. And if not, that's fine too. Yeah, it could be fun to play with that and see if you can sort of cater to that, but still keep the subject close to yourself and find a nice balance in that. And then we also do. So me and my good friend, we started a project where we paint basketball courts. I'm sure we'll get into that. And of course, that's more, it's city commissioned most of the time, or it's commissioned from nonprofit organizations, and they will more often than not have a specific idea of what the designs need to be about. So that's creatively, it was tough for me in the beginning, but you get used to it, and it can actually be a very fun challenge too. So yeah.
Awesome. And that's called Dream Courts, right? I believe that started in 2022. Is that around there? A couple of years ago?
21 was so we're in our fourth season now. So we actually, that's actually when when that show got canceled that I mentioned earlier due to COVID. That's the moment when I decided. So we had the idea for that project like laid out roughly, and then COVID came, and I just basically decided, okay, I want to finish this proposal. I want to finish writing this project and really go all in with this. So my buddy who I do this project with, he has a graphic arts and a basketball background, so he was the perfect partner to tackle this with. So we developed the program, the project, and we made a nice proposal, and we just pitched this to cities. Also with the sentiment, like, during COVID, like team sports and organized sports were sort of on hold. So it would be great to facilitate like outdoor sports in the way that we want to do with this project. And it took off really well. We're in a fourth season. We're actually in the middle of a project right now that I'm just taking this one day off from, and it's our 11th court since 2021. So it's been awesome. It's been a lot of fun. Yeah.
So is it something that if somebody works in a municipal center that you would welcome an invitation? Are you accepting applications?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we want to. We're so excited about this project because it's very far removed from the stuff that I've been used to do, like especially from my studio work. Like I said, my creative ego needs to sort of take a backseat because I need to compromise a little bit. Also because I'm working with my friend whose visual style is completely different from mine, but we really make these community projects, and we provide workshops in the first weekend that we start a project. So all the kids from the area, from the neighborhood, they can come and help us paint the basic layout, and then we'll clean it up and finish it in the next week or two. And I think just from doing that, it's something that I feel like I want to do in my personal mural projects more and more as well, because I feel like the sort of unilateral approach to creating and installing public art, it can cause friction, I think, in communities when you're not careful. There's a lot of backlash when there's a roundabout and a city decides to put a big abstract sculpture on it. Yeah, you're going to have people asking, like, why is our tax money being spent on something that I don't approve of, something that I don't understand? And by doing what we do is we invite the community to give input for the design, to come help us out. We organize an opening event, a big ceremonial thing, and the community becomes this big part of the art project that we install. And I think that's super valuable to instill this sense of ownership and to make people understand art. And then as a big bonus, we facilitate sports, which we're both also very passionate about. And all those things that just make it a really, really fun and rewarding project to work on.
It's amazing. And it's amazing how you're bringing the community into the conversation, not just into the conversation, but like owning that, like actually having a hand in creating that thing and making like an educational opportunity out of it too. So that like children that may want to become artists someday themselves can actually participate.
It's great that we can show them, like, first and foremost, like, look, this can be a business. Like it's something that I never learned when I grew up or even when I went to art school is, how do you make a business out of, your artistic aspirations? And, these kids, they see us actually, working on that business and, and they see that it's a possibility. And it's interesting, like the kids that help us, that participate in the workshop, they don't need to do all that much to have that sense of like, I worked on this too. They could paint 10 square inches and they would come to the opening, bring their parents and point out those 10 square inches that I did that. And it's really awesome to witness that. So that's it sort of became the third leg of my current artistic practice is, the Dream Chords project. And it basically takes up, most of every summer. So it's really great.
Awesome. Very cool. So let's talk about what you have coming up. What does the rest of 2024 look like for you and what's been your main focus lately?
So all summer we've done these courts. So we did one tennis court, and we did 2 3-on-3 basketball courts, and we're painting a full-size basketball court now. We got one more 3-on-3 basketball courts after this. And then I have the project in Italy in September, and that's basically it for the season. And then it's quieting down back to the studio, and hopefully I'm still inspired enough to make some new stuff in the studio.
Awesome. Do you have any kind of like gallery shows coming up in the distant future that you have your eye on, or not yet? There's
a couple group shows that I'm on the radar for, but ever since I switched focus from the studio work to the Dream Courts and the mural stuff, the galleries are not lining up as much anymore as they used to either. But that's fine with me. I kind of always wanted to sort of get out of that routine from working on back-to-back shows, and then I'm really excited to create a body of work on my own pace and my own terms, and taking my sweet time with it. And then my sweet time, I could say. And then, when it's done, see if I have any friction or traction or momentum left with galleries, and, they want to see if they want to roll the dice with whatever I cooked up. So that would be ideal to sort of do it like that for a change.
Awesome.
So it takes away a lot of the pressure. And
for sure. And you can spend more time with your family and make it more about, doing that than rushing and grinding all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And I just need to be aware that the paintings don't become too happy and happy-go-lucky.
Have a little bit of an edge in there.
Yeah. Maybe I shouldn't look it up too much, but I'm sure there's still some left in there. But yeah.
Anything else that you have coming up that you want to put on people's radars? Print releases, events, anything like that?
No. Just if you want to stay up to date on print releases and special events, Instagram is always a good medium to follow, and that's the most up to date sort of platform. So I would say give it a look, and if anything is coming up, it'll show up on there, and hopefully some more cool projects in the coming year.
Very cool. So last question, and this is something that I like to ask everybody. Who is one artist that you'd like to see me have on the show?
All right. I'm probably going to say someone that you've already had on the show because you have a pretty long list of artists. Okay, let me. I would like to look inside Christian Van Minen's head a little bit.
Nice.
Have you had him on?
I haven't. No.
That would be interesting because for the his work is so technically advanced. It makes me wonder sometimes, like how do you create more than 2 paintings a year? But he seems to work a lot, and and also on a subject level, like I want to know more about how he comes up with the stuff that he paints, and it's super interesting work, and never seems to get bored with it. So
awesome, very cool. Well, great suggestion. And Joram, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me today. This has been a lot of fun.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It was a lot of fun, Michael. Thank you so much for having me.
So that's it for this episode of Art Affairs. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Joram. I found it super interesting how often that Joram's done work within the context of a residency. Of course, I've talked to guests before that have done residencies, but I'm not sure that I've talked to anyone who's done so many of them. And I guess it makes sense, thinking about it, considering how he first launched his career from that residency in Brooklyn, funded by a grant from the Netherlands Art Foundation. But now, all these years later, in, a post-pandemic world with a young family by his side, that nomadic lifestyle isn't something that he really has a desire for anymore. Now it's all about being there for his family. That's number one. And I think adjacent to that idea of, interests evolving over time is this observation that having non-stop back-to-back shows where there's this constant feeling that expectations are hanging over you, that can lead to you compromising your authenticity a bit, for the sake of giving galleries what they want. So when COVID happened and everything slowed down, it gave Joram the opportunity to pause and, really reevaluate his priorities, giving himself the freedom to go in new directions. That's really cool. Though honestly, if you're struggling with a similar situation, it doesn't have to take a pandemic to, get you to make that kind of change in your life. So thanks again to Joram for joining me today, and thank you for checking out the show. I'm truly grateful for your support. And just a reminder, one big way you could help out if you're really enjoying the show would be to check out the show's Patreon. You can find all the details on patreon.com/artaffairs. And as always, you can contact me through my website at artaffairs.podcast.com or on Instagram at artaffairs.podcast. So until next time, be good to yourself and be good to each other.